Welcome everyone to another episode of Cinematic Realms. I'm your host, John Webster. With me today is my trusty co-host, Jared Kozel. And oh my God, look, we have a blue lemon, or many blue lemons,
Hi.
joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
And thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
No, just say even better because we're finally going to talk about this movie.
Well, thank you so much for joining us because this has been a long time coming. Because all three of us love this movie, which, by the way, let me go ahead and introduce what we're actually talking about in case people didn't see the title card. We're talking about the Robert Eggers 2022 mindfuck. We're not monetized, so I'll say it. The Northman, or the Northman. And oh my God, what a weird, beautifully bonkers movie this is.
Yes.
I was just talking and Trish about how who's the name of the convention we went to? I'm drawing a blind.
That was the cursed MegaCon of 2022.
MegaCon. Oh yeah, the one where we went together and we barely saw each other.
Let's.
Because of the bundled autograph signing for the Hobbits.
Dear God, that was horrible. Worst con ever.
And no cell phone signal to speak of, so I couldn't even tell you guys where I was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we knew where you were, basically, in the general area, but we didn't know how you were surviving. But
yeah, exactly.
It was just bad.
Oh my God, we could have a whole stream just complaining about that. But the nice thing was, though, that we tried to make up for it in the after hours, once the con was over each day.
Oh yeah,
I know one night
the weather was horrible, and the weather was absolutely horrible. It was downpouring, and we lost the car.
Oh my God, yeah. We had to go on quite an adventure to try.
Yeah.
Well, we call it an adventure now, and not so much at the time.
No. Anyway, go on. I'm sorry.
No, real quick, I'll just say hi to everybody who's popped in, and we just lost Trish. I think she might be going because signal issues.
My cam may do that once in a while. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. I want to say hi to Laura.
Yes, Laura.
Which I'll go ahead and say, we were just talking about this before. If Laura was unable to join us this week, otherwise we might have been talking about another freaky movie, which would have been Aliens. That's going to be sometime in the future. We're definitely going to be tackling that. I want to say hello to Jolie, our wonderful friend AR, who I'm due to have back on to along with the wonderful AK to talk about the second volume of Kill Bill, because we never got back to that after I had to go on hiatus. We'll call it a hiatus. Really, it was me trying to recover from being totally overwhelmed. And also, Lady Starfall, thank you for tuning in. Love you guys so much. So anyway, we were having a horrible experience at that con. And so one of the nights we ended up back at your guys' hotel room, and you and I just chatted for at least an hour, if not more, about this movie. And I knew that we were going to have to talk about this at some point. And then it was absolutely wonderful when I was listing on the site formerly known as Twitter my favorite movies of the year, and I found out that Jared and I had picked 4 out of 5 of the same movies, and of course one of them was The Northman. So this is just wonderful that we all have the same weird, bizarre taste,
Yeah.
and we get to talk about this.
Yeah. Pretty much if a movie has A24 in front of it, probably gonna like it.
Well, actually, that's one of the interesting things about this, that even though Robert Eggers often works with A24, this was actually a Focus Features film.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, it just kind of had that flavor, so I just assumed,
Oh yeah, well, because normally that's who he works with. Even though I haven't seen the other films, I'm pretty sure both The Witch and The Lighthouse.
We have to watch that.
They're both A24. Although A24 is supposedly going to be making a foray into larger budgeted movies, and this does feel like the kind of movie that they would go for.
Hi, Kate. Hi, Cassie. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, Kate, you probably haven't seen this one, have you? No. Thank you guys for stopping in. Okay, so, well, I'll just start off by saying why I even went to go see this movie, because even though I haven't seen any other Robert Eggers movies, which I seriously have to correct, I have the 4K of The Witch standing by. It's just
we have to watch that one together. So
I will happily talk about The Witch anytime. Well, and the Lighthouse too. The Lighthouse, that might even be like of the three, we'll get into this. The Lighthouse is probably the weirdest of the three, which means it's great.
I knew it. It was a real big leap to think that maybe Kate hadn't seen this, but I took a gamble, and what do you know? But looks like Cassie has, so yeah. Yeah, no. Truth be told, Kate, I don't know if you're going to go for this or not. It's one of those that I can't really, I can't recommend necessarily to people, because it's, you're either going to be on board for it or you're not. But anyway, the reason why I was interested in this movie was because it had the same kind of bizarre out there vibe of The Green Knight, which had just recently come out and was actually my favorite movie of the prior year. And so I was like, I'm feeling these weird, freaky, historical, would we call them epics, or just, they're very, they're smaller in scale, and they're about telling really traumatizing character stories.
Yeah.
But I went to go see this, and it was funny because at the time I was not doing so well. Not to get too sad for a moment, but simultaneously I was going through the fact that my mom had just gone into the assisted living facility, and health-wise I was going through a lot of stuff. I was having my dental issues at the time, so my mouth was really dry. I just remember that going to this movie and my mouth was super dry, and thankfully it was so immersive and involving that after about 30 minutes I just completely forgot about it, because I was overwhelmed by the movie. So, and instantly it was like, oh my God, this is my favorite.
It's amazing how Anya Taylor-Joy just heals whatever ails you.
Oh yeah.
Just
she has that mystical power.
She really does. So and so does Alexander Skarsgård's abs, which was the plot of the movie, pretty much.
There are many reasons to watch the plot of this movie and define plot however you will.
Yeah, it does look like I restrained myself and did not add a picture of the two of them out in the forest. I think I had run across one of those pictures, but at the time, but I'm looking through and I behaved myself. I did not. I did not add that to the list of pictures.
Save it for the well of thirst.
Yeah, exactly. No, so yeah, I just saw this movie and I was like, there's just like, this is not a movie for people who are like normal and well adjusted. It's just so out there. I tell people that it starts like Conan the Barbarian and then it just goes off into a really weird, twisted direction. Even like the opening, it has, like an opening voiceover that sounds like it's definitely inspired from Mako's voiceover from Conan the Barbarian. And you're like, okay, I kind of know what this is going to be.
Yeah, you think it's just going to be, this is Sword and Sandals or something,
And like, no. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Jared, why don't you start up, because Trish and I have kind of recounted how we discussed them. What was your exposure to the movie? What were you expecting, and what was your reaction when you saw it?
Well, compared to your epic story of how you came to first see this movie, my story is comparatively boring. I just, saw it in theaters, had a good time with it, but it was not what I was expecting. But that was what I was expecting in a weird way, because unlike you, John, I had seen the first two Robert Eggers movies. Back in 2015, his debut film, The Witch, and in 2019, his kind of psychological drama, The Lighthouse. And I went into both of those movies with a pretty blank slate and came out of it thinking, oh my God, what did I just watch in the best way? On Twitter before this stream debuted, I in my attempt to entice people to watch this movie and this stream, I described these three movies and this chapter in particular as the third chapter in what I affectionately call Robert Eggers' darkly awesome mindfuck trilogy, which is, and to be clear, his first three movies, The Witch, The Lighthouse, and Northman, they are not an actual trilogy. They're just the three movies that this director has made. But they are very thematically of a piece. And if you want to get in the, I don't know if right mindset is the right way to frame it, because there's not much right about the way that this movie engages with your mind, but it will, if you can get on its wavelength, then you will just have a wicked good time with all of these. In particular, so The Witch, I'm not usually the biggest horror fan, but The Witch completely blew me away because it is a very unconventional horror movie. It takes place in I think it's the 15 or 1600s puritanical New England. It's very sparse. There are almost no jump scares, but the movie is viscerally terrifying. Like it has a very unsettling quality that makes you feel like you are watching something that should not be seen. But it's great. And by the end of it, you are just left in a place where you're wondering in the best possible way, what did I just watch? And then that's taken up to a next level with The Lighthouse, which is, I could describe it as a psychological drama between two lighthouse keepers who are trapped on an island. But that does not do the movie justice of what The Lighthouse is. It is quite possibly the mindfuckiest movie that ever mindfucked. And there is and it is like, it truly is about one of the best depictions I've seen about what it might be like to, slowly go insane. that I've seen on in film. And there's also a mermaid, not the kind of mermaid you would see in with hanging out with Ariel. Very different mermaid. But I say all that to say that having seen those two movies, when the Northman came out, I saw that it was going to be a Viking revenge tale, and I saw the trailer and I'm like, this looks dark, this looks intense, this looks awesome. I loved Robert Eggers' first two movies. I'm here for this. But I also went in knowing this seems like the most straightforward movie he's told, in terms of pitch. There's got to be a twist. Oh, there are a few twists. Yeah. So, and by the end of it, I walked out of it being like, that was once again a mind fuck in the best possible way. So I was, having gone into that expecting to be mind fucked, I was very satisfied. But I couldn't have predicted the way that I was going to be, engaged with that. Although if I'd looked at the original inspiration for the tale, I may have had a better idea about what I was in for. This being essentially based on the same legend that ultimately inspired William Shakespeare's Hamlet. But still, I was not, I did not expect what I got, but that it was exactly what I wanted. So I was very satisfied. And we'll try to stop saying the word mindfuck in this stream. Otherwise, I will probably get us, censored.
Well, I was going to say, Jared, if you want to call it those three movies a trilogy, I think it's pretty, in a way, what links those three together is that Eggers really likes blurring the lines of reality and myth, magic, in the Lighthouse case, maybe hallucination, or so the audience can never be sure of what they're seeing. Is this really happening or not really happening? So there's a lot of that goes on in all those movies.
And and obviously another theme which is very prevalent in this one is traditional family values.
Yeah.
But wouldn't want to go to Thanksgiving dinner with these folks.
No. Well, it's funny. Sorry, go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, when you talked about, when you mentioned Hamlet, it's pretty on the nose with the characters' names. Amleth is an anagram for Hamlet. Queen, let's say Gudrun, Gertrude, and then Olga. It's Ophelia. And there's a Yorick who doesn't make an appearance in the play, but he's a fool, and there is a fool in the court of the king. So.
Oh, and there's a skull. They even
there's
get the.
Yeah. So he pretty much. I'm
right here.
Yeah.
Just to start out, I was waiting for the right first image to drop, and let's just freak out everybody right off the bat.
Right. Amazingly, Willem Dafoe is only wearing a little bit of makeup in that one. He's just that amazing.
And by the way, I would like to say, is it contractually obligated that Kate Dickie appears in every one of these kinds of movies?
I think so.
Yeah, no,
it's a very small part, brief appearance, but yeah, it cracks me up how she's always in.
It just makes, because she's also in The Witch too, and it just makes me think he must have seen her in Game of Thrones bearing her chest in the most unsettling way and decided that he just needed Kate Dickie in one of his movies doing something really freaky while it's out.
Definitely, yeah. Kate Dickie plays a character that I'll just say has more than a passing resemblance to Lysa Arryn in The Witch, and also if you weren't having enough Game of Thrones Phil from that movie, the male lead is played by Ralph Ineson, aka Dagmar Cleftjaw, who also has a small cameo in this movie.
And for those of you who have seen The Green Knight, he played different director. I don't want to lump that in. It's very much a different director, but it's that same kind of, it's in the same wheelhouse of really weird historical movies, but he plays the Green Knight in that.
Yeah, those two movies would make a very interesting double feature if you haven't had enough of insanity from watching the 3 Robert Eggers movies in a row.
So I'm trying to think of even where to.
Have we even told anybody what this movie is about?
Let's do a plot summary, or try to at least the setup.
So it's basically, as we were talking about, this is the story that inspired Hamlet and numerous other revenge tales. Actually, the end of the movie brought my mind to The Lion King.
It's also based on Hamlet.
And the main character, Amleth, is the prince of this kingdom. All the names in this movie,
don't even try to pronounce the.
Don't even try.
Name. I'll have to look the name of the kingdom up. But the movie starts as his father, played by Ethan Hawke, is returning, home from some battle or war, and that basically he's killed then by the uncle, and Amleth swears revenge. Takes a few years for him to get back on track with that plan until he's urged to do so by the seeress
played by Bjork.
Yes. Who compels him to do this through like the threads of fate and all this stuff. And that's what kind of kickstarts things. But what I love about then the sort of twist right there is that he goes off to Iceland to get his revenge because the uncle has actually lost the kingdom that he stole from the brother, which, is just, but that's part of what I love about this movie is that it's so much of this film is, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Unceremonious. It's down and dirty. And it's like he ends up having to go to basically the ends of the earth to get his revenge.
Yeah, and according to the characters, Iceland's like a total shithole. Like nobody wants to be there, and it's like, and they end up having to like start a farm there, and they're like, it's so pathetic. I mean, they're just ruling over this farmstead. It's just so, like, it's just such they've fallen so low from where they used to be. So it's like out in the middle of the stick. So it's.
Oh no. But yes, she to pick up on what Trish was saying, the movie kind of has a twist right off the bat in the sense that the idea is Amleth was the prince of this kingdom of, I'll give it a shot, Prasne, who, when his father is killed by his traitorous uncle, he vows vengeance, and you would think that, also I want to, restore the kingdom. But before Arvindil dies, he basically curses Fjolnir and is like, winning the kingdom this way is not gonna last. That like band that signifies the king is gonna slide right off your arm. you will be cursed for this. And we find out, in the intervening years during which time Amleth grows up to be Alexander Skarsgård, that as soon as Fjolnir took over the kingdom, another king from Norway just came right in and stole it from him, and basically now he's living the life of a simple farmer, but maybe a little bit more than that. He's got slaves, he's got warrior. He's basically like a small petty chieftain rather than a king.
Yeah.
Which right off the bat, it's like, you you get what you deserve. But he's like, but he's still doing. It's funny. I'll say he's still doing well enough, considering he's got slaves and servants. It's like, by the way, we should make it clear, like, none of the people in this movie are really good.
No.
I could make a case that maybe Olga has, although she does some dastardly stuff, she just does it to evil people. So we're like, you know what? We're rocking with her. But yeah. Even though Amleth is our hero, as that opening scene where he's a berserker and raiding the village shows, not a great dude.
No.
This is for you, Trish.
Thank you. Thank you. The plot.
Enjoy that one.
Behold.
I'm even gonna say it. Good on you, Alexander Skarsgård. he definitely looks good in this movie.
Yeah.
He does, like, and you can see that even though he's getting into the whole thing of like unleashing the animal within in that sequence, and he's doing like horrible things, you can also see that like he's not really reveling in what he's doing, and he seems to like know that he's lost and that he's doing really horrible things, but he's still doing it.
Yeah. Well, let's back up a bit, okay?
Okay.
So to the moment where,
oh no.
You're right, Laura. So let's back up a little bit.
Yeah.
Like when Amleth is a boy, and like him and his father have after his father comes back from battle and he's reunited with him, it's revealed that his father has been mortally wounded. And he got a cut to the liver that he knows he is not going to survive, but he knows that he doesn't want to die in his bed like an old man. He desperately wants to die in battle. So he knows that Amleth is going to have to ascend the throne very soon. So he takes Amleth to a cave to do a ritual with Willem Dafoe's character, who is Heimir the Fool, who makes quite the impression in his first opening scene. But he is also a fool, but also a shaman in a way. And he takes Amleth on his this first spiritual journey, and him and his father sort of like impress upon young Amleth that if his father falls in battle, he must this is so important that he must avenge his father. This is the way of things. This is how you live with honor. This is how, it's a lot of, honestly, it's a lot of Viking morals and values being passed down in this moment.
It's very important because it lays the groundwork over a lot of the actions that are taken throughout the film. It's like important that it's impressed upon the viewer that this is a very important part of the culture and family, and the fact that if his father is killed, he must stop at nothing to achieve vengeance. And the same holds true for later on in the movie for Fjolnir's, son as well. That would be expected of him, and that
True.
then, and we'll get to that, but that's why a lot of the things that happen in the latter part of the movie kind of have to unfold, because this whole thing with the cycle of violence, it's like, unfortunately, this is the world that they're in, and the culture, and unfortunately, a lot of blood has to be shed.
I think one thing that's really important in that whole, spiritual scene is that the movie keeps going back and forth between this dichotomy of being an animal and being a man. So they're supposed to enter the cave as animals, and him and his father, are crawling on the ground. They're acting like dogs, and Hymir asks them, like, how can you have to prove you're a man, So there's something very kind of funny happens at that point, but you have to prove that you're a man, and that's tied into this oath of vengeance and honor. So I think, as we see later on, when Amleth grows up and he gets into that berserker group, is that he's back to being an animal. They have a ritual for the berserkers where they're just like, you're just in human skin, but you're actually an animal, and they're calling upon that beast inside them. So there's this distinction, I think, and if you want to call it morals, you could kind of relate it to chivalry in a way, is that the rules of violence are that you are exacting revenge for honor's sake, for family's sake, for loyalty, for that kind of thing, and and for your fate, and to go to Valhalla. Whereas animals just kill indiscriminately and care for nothing. They don't have honor. So I think that's part of the theme here, is that Amleth goes, like, his hate drives him into this animal state where it has no place to go, except now he's just raiding villages and raining violence and bloodshed upon innocent people that did nothing to him. But then when fate draws his his uncle back in his path, he has the choice then to start becoming a man again.
Yeah. God, and by the way, I just take this moment to say that the fate that draws him back in, as Jared mentioned, played by Bjork, like the costume and production design that's is insane.
Amazing.
And I also want to seriously praise the writing of this film, because especially in terms of like the dialogue we get, so much of this movie just feels like it's Viking myth come to life. It's like, it's not even like it's just a quote unquote movie. It's, it just feels like this is something that you would read out of some ancient text or something. It's just so beautifully done. But like I said, the whole thing is very brutal and just brutal and dirty, and 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 we get that right off the bat when we were talking. You're talking about when Amleth and his father, descend into the cave, and and they have to prove that they're men, not animals. And of course, the way they prove that is Amleth's father, burps really loud, and then Amleth, farts, and it's like right off the bat, you're like, okay, this is not a, this is the type of story we're dealing with.
Though that burp and that fart have thematic significance.
Yeah. I'll just take a moment now while we're still talking about the beginning of the film, to talk about some of the actors in this film. And speaking of Amleth's father, played by Ethan Hawke, which I find this to be an absolutely amazing performance, because what we see in the first act of this movie is as was mentioned before, throughout this movie, there are things that we're not entirely sure if we're seeing things as they're really happening, or as perhaps Amleth imagines certain things. And so in the first act of this movie, we're very much seeing his father through his eyes. And so we see a very loving relationship, and the way his father greets him with the whole father is never too old to for what does he say, for a good smothering.
Just cute.
Yeah, and so we like his father because of the bond he has with Amleth. But of course, we do learn some things throughout the course of the movie, and which casts, as we said, nobody's really a great person in this movie, and so we definitely hear things about his father that cast doubt on that. And I think Ethan Hawke does a really great job of threading that line between, we can certainly imagine those things about this man, but that bond that the two of them have kind of drives the revenge aspect of the story. And that's part of why we continue to, quote unquote, root for Amleth, even as he's doing many horrible things.
Yeah, he's Ethan Hawke. He's only in the opening prologue, effectively the first 20 minutes of the movie. But it's important that they got an actor of his caliber. I'll just say Ethan Hawke is one of my favorite working actors today. I just think he's awesome in everything he does. But particularly in this movie, he's playing a character who, as you say, John, we have an understanding of him based on what we see through Amleth's eyes, because to Amleth, he is his father, and the love that Arvindil has for his son and the love that Amleth has for his father, that, as we find out, is one of the few genuine things that actually did have some basis in truth in this opening sequence. Because as we will find out to very significant effect later, the relationship that appears to be between the king and the queen and the Amleth's relationship with his mother is not at all what it seems. And that is at the heart of the twist, later in the movie. So you can understand why Amleth ultimately, this mission and that he undertakes in this scene with his father and with Amir, that ultimately will define his life, and as we learn, becomes entangled with this prophecy, the prophecy of blood and of renewal and of the mythical Maiden King. That still has to be grounded in an emotional core for us to care, and we care throughout the movie in large part because we can feel Amleth's heartbreak and fury at losing his family this way in such a young age and in such a horrific betrayal by his uncle. He suffers a horrific trauma in this moment, watching his father die and then watching his uncle order his death and then having to fight his way to freedom and then rowing off on the freezing North Atlantic Sea to God knows where. And as we see when we catch up to him, some 15, 20 years later, he has had to do some truly terrible things in order to survive. And it has left him, effectively like as a shell of a man. there's a scene later in the movie when he's speaking after reuniting with his mother, where he talks about the fact that essentially he has lived a life of death and he is bound to, see it through. And in his words, quote, "Only then will I find out if living is to my liking." And as we know from that opening scene, living in this culture basically is the route to a good death. And could they want to die in battle, they want to go to Valhalla, and the only way to do that is to die by the sword. But could there be more of that than that? That's a question that we see Amleth ultimately reckon with his, in his relationship, particularly with Olga later in the movie. And he ends up choosing to essentially subvert fate, but not defy it. But it all starts here. And that's why this opening prologue is so critical.
Yeah. Oh God. And you mentioned about wanting to die in battle, and his father very much wants that for his own fate. And this is how much of a here we're going to use that word again. How much of a mind fuck this movie is, because I'm so used to twists in movies, so I feel like I'm always on the lookout for that kind of stuff. And so I wondered if the fact that, early on I was like, oh, but is his mother like part of this betrayal? And but he tells her that I shall, I need to die in battle. So my mind was working, is part of like why she orchestrates this, to give him that, and to have it so that he'll die in battle rather than like on the deathbed. What I couldn't anticipate is what her motives actually were. And so when it gets to later in the movie, when we find out, which, and to be clear, like I think her actual motives are quite sympathetic. But it's the actions that she's willing to take to, for her own safety, and to a certain extent, the safety of, her other children, but only up to a point. She's a really screwed up character.
Yeah. I mean, she's, we think like she is a character trying to on her quest to exact her own vengeance and to avenge herself. But I mean, if we're looking at this thematically of, is she an animal or a human? And her vengeance isn't just squarely on the man who wronged her. It is like she has no care for anyone, in that quest, so she is much more of a wolf in some ways, like, which makes her a fascinating character, really fascinating. Like, so
she's amazing. And yeah. By the way, might as well take the moment to just absolutely praise Nicole Kidman. I mean, not a shocker here, but what a performance.
Yeah.
And it's just absolutely shocking when, in that confrontation scene with her and Amleth, once she starts saying all this stuff, it's like, holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, then, I mean, in hindsight, a lot of it starts to make sense in that prologue scene where, you see the relationship between her and the king is very formal and distant. They're like hold each other at a distance, it's and even when I was going to say, even when they're together in their chambers, and they, you'd think that, oh, okay, like they're husband and wife. They've just been reunited after a long time apart, and she wants to be intimate with them. And this is just after he revealed that he has a wound. Apparently, he got stabbed in the liver. And she wants to have an intimate moment with him. And he actually turns her down and says, I want to die in battle. But like, I didn't think of anything of it at the time. But then now I'm thinking about it. It's like, was she trying to finish him off in bed? Like overexerting himself and that he would die then and there in bed, and it just looked like natural causes, and oh well, you know. But it's kind of like that could be, you know, honestly, the king, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce his name, does not trust her. Like somewhere in his mind, he doesn't trust her because, like, look at what his jester, Heimir, makes a very crude joke about her and his bastard brother, Fjolnir, getting it on or having the hots for each other. And, you know, that apparently touches a nerve with Fjolnir, which probably confirmed it for him of how, you know, that it is true. Else, like, why would he get so upset by that joke?
But I find Fjolnir such a fascinating character because okay, yeah, that probably does confirm it, but he's like, yeah, it's just like he doesn't want it so blatantly said. It's just something about the way he responds to that. It's just so interesting, and the fact that, you know, it's kind of left unsaid exactly how much he actually wanted to kill his brother versus, you know, how much he's urged to do so. And
clearly there's some resentment. I think it's the Gudrun pushes. She admits it herself. She pushed him to do it.
Yeah, it seems like Fjolnir's kind of natural resentment is built out of the fact that he is a bastard, you know, and which presumably, you know, for anyone familiar with Game of Thrones and how bastards are viewed in, you know, medieval kind of culture, it's a fair assumption that even if there was ever some measure of brotherly affection between the two, Arvindil looked down on Fjolnir his entire life. When Fjolnir has him, you know, at his mercy, he says, I believe the word is, "You behold your brother's gaze in amazement. I knew well you would. Pity you never paid a bastard's eye heed before. Know how swiftly your brother, like, swings his sword now." And it's because he, you know, so I don't get the sense necessarily that it was always, he would, like, unlike in another analog, you know, for Hamlet, you know, the Scar character is just constantly scheming because he wants the throne. And in the original Hamlet, you know, King Claudius, you know, that is his motivation to get the throne. We never really get the sense that that was Fjolnir's ultimate motivation, because his love, as we can call it, that for Gudrun actually seems pretty sincere. And when after Fjolnir is overthrown by King Harald of Norway and exiled to Iceland, he is not swearing a quest of vengeance like, I will take back the throne that was mine from the man who stole it from me. He seems relatively content, all things considered, to live out his life in exile with his wife and his two sons.
And I find it, and I love the fact that we've got that scene with him telling, you know, his younger son, you know,
Gunnar,
to, you know, he says, never let you know, your servants, you know that you're not as strong or capable as them, or something to that effect. And the son says, but nobody's watching us. I think he's very much content to sort of work the land. And and to do that. And so it just goes to show that, like, you know, someone who yearned to be king would, even in their, you know, even in those circumstances, would probably seek to lord that over, you know, people, even in those circumstances. And the fact that he doesn't, you know, says that it was never really something that he, you know, required for his own sake. I don't think he was yearning for, you know, for kingship.
Yeah.
Oh, we're losing Trish a lot here.
That's such a shame.
Yeah.
Hopefully she'll make it back soon.
Yeah. So yeah, that's just why I find that so interesting. And you know, not to say that like I said, nobody's really a good person. This Fjolnir is awful in a lot of ways, but I just found that I just love that they added those interesting layers to him, because it just makes him so much more of a fascinating character than you know, than we normally get for these types of stories. Like you know, he could have just been a Scar type character, or Claudius as he's normally represented. I think Claudius in Hamlet is actually a much more fascinating character when you get the full story. For those of you who've seen Kenneth Branagh's film version of Hamlet, I think that Claudius comes off, you know, much more three-dimensional in that than we typically get in shorter versions of Hamlet. So I just love that in this story, Fjolnir, you know, is given all that dimension, but he still absolutely deserves to die in the end. But yeah, and that's the thing. I know a lot of people often, you know, talk about how they sometimes they can't get into stories if, like, you know, if everybody's just so loathsome. But for me, I love those types of stories so long as the characters are interesting, and I find that with this story definitely. There's aspects to all these characters that are really intriguing, and we can feel for them even as we recognize how horrible they are.
Yeah. There is a version of this story in a different universe that you theoretically could tell from the perspective of Fjolnir and Gudrun as the heroes, essentially being the heroes in their own story of, like, overcoming the king, like the evil king, in this case being Arvindil, who, as we learn, kidnapped Gudrun, who was a slave, and essentially conceived a son on her via rape, and clearly, you know, was not a great guy throughout his entire life, regardless of what we see through his relationship with his son Amleth. And there is a version of the story where they, you know, they kill him, they take the kingdom, and even after losing it, they go off and they're living in peace. And in that version of the story, Amleth is this almost supernatural demon of vengeance who has come to wreak blood and hell and all kinds of terrible vengeance on their family and their community, to the point that he effectively, you know, wipes them out. Amleth in the end not just gets his vengeance on Fjolnir, he also murders his own mother, Gudrun. He kills Fjolnir's son, Thorir, in his sleep, and he kills the young boy who could theoretically, had he let him live, could have grown up to had a similar story to him, but he never gets that chance because Amleth, not necessarily that it was its intention, but Amleth cuts his throat. So it's a fascinating dynamic, because our sympathies, based on the way the movie is framed, are very much with Amleth, but where the quote unquote original sin of this whole family is really kind of depends on where you start the story.
Yeah, I think Trish and I talked about this whole thing with the fact that Amleth ends up, killing the killing of the young boy is, man, it's a tricky one that, but we've been shown that, like, then the cycle, like, and not saying, oh my God, yeah, it was a good thing to do, but the cycle of violence would then continue, and the son would then come after Amleth's children.
Well, yeah, I mean, it already kind of started, because, like, the boy walks in, he sees his mother on the floor, and then he just pulls out a knife and starts stabbing Amleth in the back, and he's already ready to exact his vengeance then and there. And I guess not making excuses for Amleth or anything like that, but he just basically reacts, grabs the kid, and so I don't think it wasn't his plan to kill him. It just ended up that way as a horrible casualty of this vengeance mission. But in a way, it's like, when it's done, and he realizes the only one left is Fjolnir, and
and the thing is, with cycles of vengeance, if the cycle is ever going to be broken, someone has to make a choice to break it, and that's kind of what Amleth thinks that he's doing and is doing when he makes the decision, rather than fleeing Iceland with his love Olga and their two, unborn children, one of whom will become the Maiden King of Prophecy. He ultimately, there was a point when Amleth feels like he can break the cycle just by leaving, because he's now recognized that his mission of vengeance to kill his uncle, avenge his father, and save his mother is a completely messed up and endeavor, because his mother was complicit in his father's murder and despises him and wants him dead. So he makes what seems like a pretty mature choice to walk away from it and, flee with Olga to their kinsman in Orkney, I believe. But when he learns that Olga is pregnant with the twins, he makes the decision to break the cycle in another way by, as he says, choosing both the hate for his enemies and the love of his kinsmen, because he believes that were he to flee, that Fjolnir would simply track him down and kill him and his love and his offspring. Would Fjolnir have done that? We'll never know, because I think he probably would have, because at this point Amleth had killed Fjolnir's other son Thorir, and so
I was watching today, and I was like, you really should have had this breakthrough before you killed Fjolnir's son. Then you would have been in the clear.
but he ultimately decides that the way to break it is that he goes back and effectively and ends the family line in this particular cycle of violence, and kind of allows Olga and their two unborn children to be the ones who manage to escape this cycle. But he himself essentially comes to accept the idea that he cannot escape his fate. And the question, of course, is whether or not this was always as the Norns of fate spun it, or if this was always a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I just wanted to answer Lady Starfall's question. Olga is like a sorceress. Yeah. I guess she is from a Slavic land, and I guess she has gods that are of the earth and the wind, like nature gods. I was going to say, by our modern sensibilities, you would almost think that this story would go in the direction because this is yeah, it's set in a you know, in what is it, like before, like the 800 BC, was it BC? I forget, but it was, but certainly pre-Christian. And you would think it, but it's still a movie and a story told in a modern world. So you would think that this story would go in the direction of Amleth saying, you know what, like, you know, I've only known living for death, a life of death, and now I have a chance to go off with Olga and live our lives together and forget vengeance, and you know, it's only going to end in the cycles of violence and blah 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 blah. But fuck that, we're Vikings. So we have to, like, they have this strong belief system, particularly tied to the idea of their fate. Like, if you try to, you know, escape your fate, one, it's cowardly and you'll never get into Valhalla that way. Two, it's, you know, that sense of honor that, you know, if you can accept that, you know, whatever, if you can accept your fate, you can live without fear. So, but if Amleth had gone off with Olga, he'd probably be living a life of fearing, always looking over his shoulder if Fjolnir is going to come back and kill them. So in a sense, you know, it doesn't make sense to our modern sensibilities, but in Amleth's mind and in his culture, it makes perfect sense of what he has to do to permanently put an end to this cycle of violence, is to to end the last person who could possibly want to exact it.
Yeah, and it's a tragedy, but it also, if there is a hope at the end of it, you know, the ray of light, other than Amleth getting his good death in his eyes and going to Valhalla, it's the fact that he ultimately chooses to go back, yes, out of hate for Fjolnir, but in truth, the reason he really goes back is out of love for his effective wife in Olga and his unborn children, because he, you know, in ways that if he had just chosen to flee, or he had just gone to back to kill Fjolnir because that he always thought he was fated to do that, this movie would be pretty bleak and honestly less satisfying. Like, his relationship with Olga is really one of the movie's true lights, because they are very much, from the moment they meet, from the moment they recognize each other and their goals, like, their fates are intertwined. They have the same desire for vengeance, but their relationship is actually probably one of the most pure in the movie, because they treat each other as equals. They are, like, their care for one another, you always get the sense that it's sincere. And you can tell by the end, they are truly in love and they could have had a happy life together. And it's Amleth's desire to preserve that light, the one kind of piece of goodness in his life, as he says in that scene next to her, like, he's known only death. He hasn't really never felt close to another person since his childhood until he met her. And that's something he's ultimately fighting and trying to protect, rather than simply trying to destroy.
Yeah, I just love that. And yeah, I love that sort of, it's twisting, you know, his reasons for revenge. The fact that it's just so brilliant to have that decision be made out of love and wanting to save the lives of Olga, and as well as their children. And so that's what makes, like, it's funny because that's the reason for the decision to be made, and then of course he goes back and slaughters all of them, and we're like, yeah, but it's better because his reasons are better. But that's what's so goddamn amazing about this movie, is like, it's nothing's easy with it, and like horrible things happen, but it's just so interesting to watch this and think about the whys of everything, and and yeah, it's just everything's so fucked up. But it's just fascinating. It's just like, I think one of the things to make a comparison to Game of Thrones, where is another thing where a lot of effed up stuff happens, but we're made to feel better about those, screwed up things happening, because let's make some of these characters, have lovable personality quirks, and we're gonna make you feel good about supporting them as they do horrible things. But this is just like, there's enough so that the characters have our sympathy, but it's just so much darker and more twisted. Yeah, I love it.
It's a feel bad movie that weirdly makes you feel good. Like, it's a movie that, pitched a different way, could have just, like, if you pitched it a little bit more towards the light side, as it were, it would have been a very conventional, revenge story about a prince who was wronged. And if you pitched it the other way, it could have just been a purely, like, nihilistic, bleak film about, the hopeless cycle of violence and how it destroys all who participate in it. They managed to find a pretty clever balance in telling a tale that speaks to the destructive power of vengeance, but also allows in that ray of hope that makes you ultimately feel like this is a story that is worth listening to and does have a moral compass, even if it is, true north is kind of hard to find.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like moral compass. Yeah. It's but like I said, it's the fact that, it's what I was saying. I just love that the turn at the end of the movie is like, we're seeing absolutely horrible things transpire, but it's because the main character's moral compass is just a tiny bit more to the north. He's doing horrible things, but for better reasons. Let's take a break real quick and just do the mid-roll. So for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be out of town, so we're taking a couple weeks off, but we will be back on November the 4th, all three of us, because Trish is coming back, and we're going to be talking about the movie Sleepy Hollow in celebration of Halloween. Which I can't wait. I've always loved that movie, especially because I first saw it because when I was younger, I wasn't I hadn't been bitten by the Johnny Depp bug at the time of because around that time he was very much known for just all these amazing performances he gave, where the whole thing was, even if the movie wasn't great, if he was in it, he was doing really interesting things with his performances. So the first time that I saw him in something was, I don't know if it's the first time I saw him in something, but the first big thing was Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl. And then I kind of started to seek out his other films, and so I watched Sleepy Hollow, and I was just like, oh my god, this movie is amazing. And just it's a quintessential Tim Burton movie, and it's got a who's who amazing cast members and a great Danny Elfman score. So I can't wait to talk about it. I think we're going to have a blast with that one. And then as far as what's coming up after that, we have a couple of ideas. Jared, you and I have talked about doing The Banshees of Inisherin, which was another movie on our top 5 list for 2022. So looking forward to that. But we have also been talking about some Tolkien-related stuff, maybe for December. I think the one that we've had in our back pocket for a while is doing a stream or multiple streams about the Rings of Power, which I'm very much looking forward to, but also something that I just suggested to you. Those of you who have watched the channel for a while know that a little while back I did a stream on the Hobbit trilogy with a few friends. That was an interesting one because it veered a bit more negative than I would have liked. I know a lot of people were looking forward to me doing a stream where I was actually negative and snarky, and but it veered a little bit too far in that direction for me. So you and I just talked the other day about potentially doing taking time to break down those movies, a stream per film, and actually taking the time to talk about them in what I think you'd consider the more usual fashion of these streams, because I think there are a lot of things that I find just really beautiful about those films, and that I want to give them their due, because even if I don't think everything works perfectly, they are they're like members of your family, where even if you can see the flaws, there's still so much to value about them. And so I hope that we'll be able to get to do those as well sometime soon. Aside from that, like I said, we'll be back on November 4th after the stream. Anything you guys want to mention that you got going on? Trish, what's going on with
Don't even ask. Don't even ask. I've been working my ass off right now in my real life, so
that's fine.
I will
D&D
never tomorrow, so that's good.
I will just never get over when I went to Ice and Fire Con, and and when I ran into Blue and we were talking about just you Little Wolfbird, and talking about you coming on the channel and stuff, and she was like, maybe tell her we got stuff to do on ours as well.
Yeah, got shaded pretty hard.
But no, I did love telling you that.
Yeah, I know you did.
Jared, anything you want to? Yeah.
No, I mean, now that I'm, a regular participant on these streams, I'm going to be here hopefully for the foreseeable future. I don't have anything else major going on outside of it, other than, one part of my heart is always in the Star Wars galaxy, but now that Ahsoka has wrapped up, I actually kind of am looking forward to taking a little bit of a step back and, delving into some of the other movies and TV shows that I've either missed or I'm looking forward to, catching up on some of the films that are going to be in Oscar contention and things this year, which, this movie should have been, because another movie, whenever it ultimately comes out on physical media, because I'm sure you would have it no other way, John. I think it's pretty inevitable that we'll ultimately end up doing an Oppenheimer discussion as well, because to me that is the best movie I've seen this year by far, and I'm very much looking forward to revisiting it.
It's yeah, it's again really hard to wait for this stuff because I'm really annoyed at Disney where they put Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny out on digital like a month or so ago, and the Blu-ray isn't coming out until December, and it's like, God damn.
At least there still is going to be a Blu-ray, you know. Those are getting harder and harder to find. But
let's not even go down that depressing road. But yeah, no, we definitely will talk about Oppenheimer because just an absolute masterpiece, and looking forward to diving into that. But no, I'll take note of that since you want to step away from Star Wars. So that means
I never want to step away, but I'm happy to talk about other things.
No, I heard you. No talking about the Bad Batch. Then we'll take that off the table.
I feel like we would definitely. I'll just say there's a fair warning. There is a fair chance that whenever Bad Batch season 3 comes out, you and I will do a stream, and we may be the only ones on that discussion because I don't think a lot of people have seen that show. But you should give it a chance. It's well worth it.
I'm on the record as saying I think that the animated content is the best stuff. That's my favorite. It's my favorite Star Wars material. Not that, and there's been some really good live action stuff, but I just think that right now animation is where they're able to completely, go wild on the storytelling and the ambition with the scope. But if you look at the animated cinematography for the Bad Batch and the kind of stuff they're able to do, it's like I've been saying, God, just imagine the things you could do story-wise, with that kind of canvas. But that's okay. We're still getting some. I think the live action stuff has been really good.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably get a premiere date for some of those things after the SAG strike ends, which may not be anytime soon, but given how the negotiations seem to have broken down this week for unfortunate reasons. But I guess maybe that's an opportunity to just mention that, yes, the SAG strike is still going on. We still are very much, in the corner of the actors and performers wanting them to get their fair deal because they're the ones who are making the content that makes our lives better. So hopefully there will be an equitable resolution at some point, but for now we just have to continue to offer our support to them. And obviously, given everything else that's going on in the world, this has been a hard week for everybody in terms of the situation in the Middle East with Israel and being attacked by Hamas. And all I can say is, when we talk about movies like this, we're not seeking to dismiss anyone who, doesn't feel like in the right mindset to talk about things like this right now. It's just, for us, this is kind of our way to, find our little corner of happiness in a world that doesn't afford a lot of it to a lot of people. And we just hope that we can bring a little bit of light to you, be it talking about a very dark movie, but it's ultimately, there are more important things in the world, and we have not lost that perspective. We just feel like we can do both.
I think that I know for me that and whether it's horrific things happening out in the world or if it's just really difficult things that is going on a personal level, like stories have always been my refuge, and so I think it's the way that I kind of make sense of things. I always say that even though my first love is movies, I'm always doing mentally better when I make time to like get a book out and say that especially if it's a really big book, and I say for the next month I'm going to invest myself in whatever world is contained within those pages, and it usually helps me through whatever's going on. That things can be really stressful, but I think if you immerse yourself in stories, it allows us to, not just as escapism, but it really helps us to process things that otherwise we might have difficulty doing. So if talking about this stuff on here, our audience is small, but if we help anybody with that, just by talking each week about a different movie, then I hope that that's the case, that we can provide a little ray of sunshine. I know it does that for me. I said that I needed to get back into doing this because it's for my mental health, just to be able to talk with friends about these different stories, even when it's dark and depressing like this one is. And speaking of which, let's go ahead and plunge back into this twisted tale. I know that I wanted to bring this up, which actually, before we get back to that, I will just respond to Lady Starfall here. I have not seen The Winter King. I'll have to check that out and see what that's about, because I'm not sure if I've heard of it. And as far as anything on Netflix, I'm on a little bit of a Netflix break right now, so I will have to check these things out when I sign back up. These streaming services are getting too expensive. I say that as I've just the other day poured a bunch of money into buying some Blu-rays on Amazon. But we talked a lot about the character of Olga. I really just want to say, and this is not me being thirsty. I legitimately mean this, where it's like Anya Taylor-Joy. Like, I have really come to love watching her stuff. And there's so much more that I have to see. I haven't seen The Witch yet, and
we have to watch together.
Well, see, but it seems like the kind of movie I would actually want to completely focus on for my first viewing, and then we can do a watch party,
okay,
once I've seen it already. But I will just say, it's funny, because the first time that I watched anything with her in it, it was just her voice. It was Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance. And then I saw the 2020 version of Emma with her in it, and it was so funny because the whole movie I was like, oh, all I hear is is her from I just see a little puppet in place of a human. And then seeing her in this, and I've also a couple months ago watched Queen's Gambit, which was just phenomenal. So I've become a real big fan of hers. I think, of the sort of current generation of young actresses, she's just by far stands out as one of the best, if not the best. So
yeah, I think that she's one of my favorite younger actresses working today. The Witch, as far as I'm aware, was her film debut, and when I saw her on the screen in that movie. It was one of those moments where you see an actor that you don't recognize and you just are captivated by just the idea of who is that? Like, because she is just a magnetic presence on screen, not just because she has a very, she's a beautiful woman, but she's got a very visually striking look with, her eyes and the way that she carries herself, and the roles that she has chosen to take on are incredibly interesting roles. For her to essentially start her career in this very unconventional, low budget, psychological and supernatural horror movie, and then she has gone on to essentially specialize in these kind of very like psychologically elevated kinds of roles. I don't know if either of you have seen the movie Thoroughbreds, where she stars alongside Olivia Cook of House of the Dragon fame. That's a more modern story, but it's also a very dark, twisted story of like vengeance and love and friendship between these two, young women. And there's also murder in that story, which is it's a fascinating watch. And then she's also been in a movie I know you love, John, Last Night in Soho. Emma, The Queen's Gambit, as you mentioned, on TV. She also was in the M. Night Shyamalan films Glass, or Split and Glass. And then here in this movie, The Northman, she has taken on roles that are not conventional roles for an actress her age. And one of the things I love most about her is she essentially has a very timeless, almost ethereal quality to her, where whether she's in 15th or 16th century, like Puritan New England versus, Scandinavia in the 8th or 9th century, or 1960s London, or, Victorian era, Jane Austen style thing with Emma, or the modern day with a story like Thoroughbreds. She just has this it factor that commands the screen whenever you watch her. And I think she's one of the most brilliant young actresses that we have working today. I think she's going to have a very bright future ahead of her.
Lady Starfall, that was a bit before the time you're thinking of.
That was Bryce Dallas Howard.
Yeah, Bryce Dallas Howard. Yeah, because that was all the way back in 2004.
But I don't know if you guys have seen The Menu yet.
No, but
I have not. It's on my list.
Oh, yeah, you need to see that one, because I mean, it's another mindfuck movie, so I know you're gonna love it.
Excellent.
But it is, Ralph Fiennes plays a very intense character in that movie, and she can go toe to toe with him, like in every scene. So she's a phenomenal actress. Yeah.
Yeah, and I will say, spreading the love here. I still to this day have never seen True Blood, so I never really quite, got the Alexander Skarsgård, thing. But between I saw him a couple of years ago in the film The Aftermath, starring Keira Knightley, which surprise, I enjoyed that movie. I wonder why. But I thought he was really good in that. But this, like, he's just absolutely astonishing. We can go ahead and say it's obviously physically what he puts into the role, but also like just
honestly, I don't want to downplay it by just saying that, physically what he puts into it, like he's just there on the screen to be eye candy. But look, no, but I mean, like when he is in actually the berserker scene where they're kind of like getting hyped up and going through that ritual, he sounds like an animal. Like like his face contorts in a way, and the way he sounds is like he is an animal. And it's a really, yeah, it's physical, but damn, like, I don't know, it was just an incredible performance in that way.
Yeah, no, and I didn't mean that to sort of downplay.
No, I know you didn't,
but I'm just saying, but his performance, like his emotional performance, matches that.
Sure, yeah.
And just, I mean, I was just completely wowed by, what he was able to do. And of course, the character has this mantra throughout the movie, I will avenge you, father. I will save you, mother. I will kill you, Fiona. And just the way he keeps, coming back to that throughout. And there's just like this determination in his eyes, but also like this emotional side to his performance as well. Like the way you can just see how he responds in the scene with his mother, where she's revealing all this stuff, and like in one moment it's heartbreak that you can see it, and then in the next when he's outside and and Olga's like, where's your mother, and then the rage from all that comes out, and it's just and again later in the movie when he's deciding to go back and he says, I was told I have to choose between hate for my enemies and kindness for my kin. I choose both. There's just a beautiful tenderness to the character and his performance that then can give way to this, animalistic rage as well. It's just, and it would be very easy, I think, just to like, those are such, those could be such polar opposite things, but the way he manages to, merge it all together, I think it's an amazing performance.
Yeah, this is, it's weird to say for an actor who spends a lot of the movie performing incredible feats of physical strength and violence, and at times, as Trish has pointed out, like literally showing us like the beast within the man and almost acting like a beast at points. But this is a very internal performance from Alexander Skarsgård. He doesn't have a ton of dialogue considering he's the lead of the movie. A lot of the most powerful shots and emotions in the movie come when the camera is focusing on him during moments of silence, whether that's moments of rage, whether that's moments of anguish, or whether that's moments of, just confusion and heartbreak. And then particularly when he's with Olga, like moments of peace. We alluded to them before, but like their dynamic, particularly during the scene when after it's effectively their wedding scene, whether or not they actually exchanged vows, or it's not a Christian ceremony, so it's a different thing. But like when Amleth is effectively allowed to choose her, and he's like looking for her in the woods, and he comes across a woman that he thinks is her, engaging in sexual intercourse with another one of the slaves, and you see his like heartbreak, and there's heartbreak on his face, and then he hears her voice and he turns around, and he effectively you can see that like she is his light in this moment, and she is there for him when he's like, were you lost? And she is effectively like, not unless you were looking for me. I butchered that phrase, but essentially what they are saying is, these two people who were thrown together by circumstance managed to form a connection that is very real, and their scenes together, like in their love scene when they're being like very intimate with one another, that's one of the few times when we actually see the veil come down. And even though they're talking about bringing vengeance and death, you can tell that there actually is hope that's been kindled there between the two of them. It's actually a very beautiful love story hidden somewhere in this kind of dark quality, and you feel it from both sides. You feel it from Olga's side with the way that she, the loyalty that they have to each other. In the scene where, like, Olga's being threatened by Fjolnir, and she is like savage and defiant, which she is throughout the entire movie towards him. But then when Amleth, sacrifices himself effectively to allow her to escape, and then she comes back for him, it's you want them to be together, and the fact that their love story doesn't get to fully form is a part of the tragedy, but you also feel like their life together was a life well lived, however brief it was. And that's credit to their performances.
I think that their relationship and their love story, like, it's absolutely crucial to what makes this film work, because it's one ray of like hope and it's gives us a bit of warmth in this movie and emotional kindness that without that working as well as it does, the rest of the movie would just be too brutal and depressing. And speaking of, you were talking about when she comes back for him after he sacrifices himself. It's a good time to mention that's when he has that, as she comes back for him, he has that vision of being carried off by the Valkyrie, which is such a striking image. And I do think I have that. Yeah, just and oh my god, the Valkyrie is rather freaky and terrifying in their own right, but just visually just so amazing. And then it comes back to that at the end of the film, as when he dies, and they have that beautiful wide shot of of Valkyrie carrying him into the sky, and it's just it's so breathtakingly beautiful. I think that alone is just one of the most mesmerizing images that I've seen a long time in a film. So
yeah, the fact is, this movie is beautiful to look at. A shout out to not only Robert Eggers' direction, but the cinematographer Yaron Blatchke, who had been Oscar nominated for the previous Robert Eggers film, The Lighthouse, which is kind of a very striking black and white cinematography. It's a very different style, because not only is it a movie in full color, but it's these very striking, almost surrealistic, fantastical images, like the tree of life taking the form of effectively depicting the bloodline of this kingdom of which Amleth is a part, to the Valkyrie, as you mentioned, the shots of her carrying him to Valhalla and to safety and to glory, to the way that this movie uses darkness and moonlight and firelight to really kind of amp up the tension and the atmosphere. And of course, at the very end, the climactic scene taking place almost in darkness, backlit by an erupting volcano. This is gorgeous filmmaking.
Oh, it's just, yeah, absolutely amazing. I will say, what I love about, you mentioned the Lighthouse using a lot of black and white. There's actually a lot of photography in this movie that is virtually almost black and white. It's like the nighttime stuff in Iceland, in the village, where there were a couple of shots where you'll see inside some of the huts and stuff, where the fires will be in full color, but then outside it's this very dark, almost black and white. It's sort of a very pale bluish type look, but very almost grayscale, kind of look to it. And I just found that so striking, just the way they pulled that off. It just shows the benefits of like the modern age of like, color grading and what they're able to do with that. But yeah, no, just gorgeous. And what you were just saying about like the final sequence, taking, the gates of hell, and at a freaking volcano. And it's just.
Yes. Fjolnir could not win because Amleth had the high ground.
I know where that reference comes from.
I thought you might.
I didn't think you were familiar with that franchise, Jared. No, and again, like this sequence is so freaking primal. Like there they are, just both, in the buff.
Yes.
Wielding swords.
Yeah. I mean, this is the final scene. We're going to be dramatic bitches about it. So it's going to be very theatrical.
Yeah, I don't usually like to read reviews of movies, particularly movies like this, but I did happen to see one before I saw this movie, and I read it features a combat sequence where there are two naked Vikings having a ritual duel to the death against an erupting volcano, and I was like, what? And then I saw it, and I'm like, this is the only way this movie could have ended. Like, and if you ever need to like give someone a log line of like the kind of melodramatic scale that this movie operates on, there it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, this is like the type of thing where it's like, if this isn't working for you, then it's just not your type of movie. But
right.
But I was so here for it. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe.
Yeah, it's like I just love how it's like they have to have the right setting. In the story, it's not, they just wound up there. It's like in the story, they have to have this right setting for their duel.
Yeah.
It's like, we could fight to death right here in the hut where you just killed my, wife and son. But no, I'll see you at the gates of hell.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the fact that like there's a mythical, like this movie, it kind of plays with the fantastical in the sense that there are sequences in it that are overtly like supernatural and superhuman, but you can't always tell whether or not it's real, quote unquote, or if it's like a surrealistic vision. Like the sequence where he obtains the mythical sword Draugr and he has to fight the mound dweller in the moonlit barrow it seems like it's all of a sudden, this movie's taken a turn into like supernatural zombie horror, and then we kind of get the sequence that, maybe this was all in his head. But what is true is that it does seem very clear that this mythical blade cannot be unsheathed except by moonlight or at the gates of hell. And you're like, they actually mean that literally. So there is, and then, there's the sequence with Odin's ravens and everything with the seer, and who seems to know the womb, the wombs of fate, and of course the Valkyrie, and how much of this is actually, real versus a fever dream is kind of left up to the viewer's interpretation, which doesn't always work. But in this case, I think the movie is such a fever dream at its core that, of course, these kind of ambiguous fantasy sequences play right into it.
And I don't want to like skip over the too much of the scene where he gets the sword and and fights this corpse. It's like, that's just okay. So maybe it was in his head, but as a wizard once said, but why should that mean that it's not real? And yeah, no, that it's just so awesome, and it was very like Jon Snow fighting the undead.
Yeah. Oh, and actually,
Thrones.
you know who plays the Mound Dweller in the credits? Ian White, who played the original White Walkers on Game of Thrones.
I am not surprised. But yeah, no, that's just so. I remember watching this in the theater, and that scene in particular, I was like, "Oh my god, this is so my shit."
Yeah.
Oh god, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even there's the scene where he's talking to the head of Hymir, but through the he witch.
Yes.
There's a lot of shaman and seers and sorcerers in this. So.
I just love the fact that he's like, did the Raven and tell you about me? He's like, no, someone much more talkative, and he's talking about the head.
Yeah, I mean, and you can honestly, what a great effect there, because that you could say, oh yeah, that's Willem Dafoe right there. That's his head. You can spot it a mile away.
Oh god. Yeah, no. There's just so we're all on the same wavelength, with this movie, but like any number of these things, like I think most people are like, what the fuck? Get this away from me.
Yeah. So this movie, it's like it was made for, I think the budget is listed between $70 and $90 million, which it looks like a much better than a movie you would expect from that scale, but it's also like the big scale up in budget from Robert Eggers' previous films, which were pretty low budget. But it didn't do very well at the box office. It's found some success afterwards as kind of a cult favorite from home video sales and the like, but it only made like $70 million at the box office. And on the one hand, I'm honestly shocked it made even that much money. And then there's the more like irrational part of my brain's like, how is this not $1 billion movie? Because it's just.
I think it's this kind of movie, like even The Green Knight was it's hard to market. Like, how, like look at we're struggling to explain it to people sometimes in a concise way. Like, how do you if you advertise it in a way like, oh, this is just going to be sword and sandals adventure, and with Vikings, and there's people that are going to be like, oh yeah, it's like Conan, and then they're going to walk out disappointed if they didn't understand, or they might, or I don't know, or it could be too gruesome and too violent for other people. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of, but it also has a lot of emotional depth. So it doesn't fit neatly into any genre. So it's a little yeah.
And I actually I really commend Focus Features for going for this, because as we talked about before, Robert Eggers, he usually has worked with A24, and this type of stuff is in their wheelhouse, so it's never a surprise to see like some really freaky movies. And Focus Features is not like one of the bigger studios, but I think this was still a bit on the unusual side for them, and there was a little bit made about the fact that editorially this was a tough movie to sort of get across the finish line, because the studio had some concerns about I think some stuff with the length of the first act initially, and making sure that the movie moved at a good pace, because I don't think they really minded how weird it was, because that's kind of what they were asking for, but they did want to try and get it to do a little bit of business. And I mean, that was probably a doomed prospect, but and there are companies like A24 that'll just kind of give directors carte blanche, to do whatever's in their head. But this is still very much like Hollywood is a business. It's you know, and so I think one of the directors that understands that pretty well is Ridley Scott, who's always kind of trying as best he can to balance between like artistic integrity and what's going to work for the studios. But given all that, I think that this film turned out beautifully. And given, the sort of back and forth that there probably was between the studio and Eggers, like, this is a movie that just feels like, this is not a typical studio film. It's just so beautifully bonkers and out there, and I'm personally, like, just over the moon that we got something like this, and it makes me really eager to go back and see his other films, especially the Witch. Like, I know, like, Trish, both you and Laura are have been like, God damn it, John, just watch the freaking movie.
Yeah.
And it really has been about finding the right time because I want to be in like the right frame of mind when I sit down to watch it, because it's just not. And that's also why I haven't watched this one that many times since I got it on Blu-ray, is because it's not the type of movie that you just turn on in the background whenever. You definitely have to be in that mood to sit down and experience it. So it's kind of the same for The Witch. But if I have, I really kind of want to do it sooner rather than later now that I'm in the headspace, for it. And so we'll see if I can. Maybe I'll get to it in the next day or so.
Okay.
Yeah. But this is just such an amazing film. I'm still up in the air as to whether this or The Batman was my favorite movie of 2022. I don't know if I can decide. They're very different, and I love them for extremely different reasons. But they're both like wonderfully like unflinching, examples of like just incredible creative vision. So I don't think I need to choose.
No, you don't. Rankings are overrated. We use them as organizing principles but it's quibbling whether something's 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 or 27 is, at a certain point you kind of lose the point of why you're talking about it in the first place. I will say that this movie and The Batman are probably the 2 most beautifully shot movies of last year, and that I really don't have a problem figuring that out. Though the cinematography, as I think I alluded to, is gorgeous for both. And this is usually more your department, John, but the musical score in this movie is actually
I was about to ask, like, John, what did you think of the score?
What is wrong with me? I even like got the soundtrack CD out to show off, and it's this beautiful fold out thing, and you got like images from the movie with the track list. They divided the tracks up into sections, just like the movie is divided up into chapters. Like the first section is Rafsni, if that's how it's pronounced. Then follow the victim's tale, the Nightblade feeds, and the gates of hell. So I just love this, and I had to special order this because this is a rarity nowadays. We were talking about physical media. It's very rare now that like new film soundtracks actually get a CD release. I'd say about 90% of everything is only released digitally now. So that should give an indication of like, the fact that I did love the music. I talked about the parallels with Conan the Barbarian. The opening track very much has that like pounding, drums of that, but then it's from there on out, it's like a wildly different kind of score, and it's just, normally I'm all about traditional orchestration and melody and all that. That is not this movie. it's like really pounding, like just making you feel the sometimes the strangeness of the settings, or and then like when they're actually fighting at the volcano, it's so like it feeds into that primal feel. I think it's beautifully composed and performed, and just not the typical kind of score I would go for, but I think it just worked brilliantly in the film, and I love that there is a, I guess you would call it a theme. It's not that type of score, but that plays over like when Amlet's father, is returning home. This kind of almost sounds like it's on a guitar. Almost this, and then it comes back when they're at the volcano fighting, and it's just like it brings this, makes it come full circle, and it's just so beautifully done. And then the stuff with the Valkyrie, there's like this very ethereal music going on, and I'd have to study the score more to be able to like get in depth about like the types of instruments that are used and the themes and stuff like that. But I will just say that I am a huge fan of the music in this film, and I think it's the perfect score for the movie, and yeah, it just brilliant.
Yeah, even though it's not, the music weirdly feels like almost diegetic to the film itself at times, because it's so heavy on percussion and the drums and the kind of like the beats of war and the kind of things that you would expect to hear like armies playing as they, march off to battle. And I don't, as you said, John, I don't know like a lot of the instruments that they use to compose the score, but I have a feeling that they were instruments that are kind of unique to Northman, Viking, Scandinavian culture, and that kind of authenticity feeds into the making you feel like you're being transported to another time and almost another realm, given how fantastical this movie is at times.
Yeah, no, it's just awesome. And I do want to say, like, what I was saying about ordering the CD, I was very happy that I was able to order physical copies, special order through like, smaller labels, both that and the score for the Batman, which was made available like months after the score was initially released on, for those of you who know about its website and a company called Mondo Records. And normally they do a lot of vinyl releases, but they put out a CD edition of the store, a double CD edition. So I was really happy that my two favorite movies actually got physical CD releases, so I was able to buy them. But yeah, no, just absolutely beautiful score, and just so right for the film. And yeah, it's just something that's like is so impressive about the movie is that, and this kind of goes along with a general fatigue that I do tend to feel about a lot of modern movies, and I don't want this to be about gripes with other movies, and so I won't like name anything in particular, but it's really great when we get some cinema that feels like it's timeless and that it could have come out, obviously, you can tell it's a newer movie, but it's timeless in a way that you wouldn't be able to necessarily pinpoint like, oh, this has like very modern looking visual effects, so it's, you know, it must be from this period. And I feel the same way about a lot of, you know, we were talking about Oppenheimer. Christopher Nolan's movies are the same way, where they feel very rooted in another age almost of movie making. And, you know, and this is the same type of feeling, where because it feels like some ageless myth, I just think it's so beautifully made. And you know, and I don't, you know, you mentioned about like Oscars and awards and stuff. I try not to get hung up on that stuff too much anymore, but oh my God, it is so infuriating that this movie was just completely ignored. I get that it's a super weird movie, but at least, you know, it should have been up for some technical awards.
Like even the Green Knight even got snubbed quite a bit. So it was, yeah.
I don't think we've given, because we've mentioned him several times, but I just want to give even more credence to Robert Eggers, the director of this movie, because he is probably one of my favorite working directors today. And it's because he has such a clear vision for his movies, and the way that he manages to create these incredibly rich, fully lived in worlds on a relatively small budget, all things considered, but with such a like intense sense of place and forward momentum and wide vision. And I kind of think of it, when I think about his style, I describe it as fever dream filmmaking, because that's the way his movies feel to me. And the fact that he was able to come out with his debut feature, The Witch, hit it out of the park in my view. Mm-hmm. Come back a couple years later with The Lighthouse, which is, I don't want to underscore it, it's one of the most insane movies that I've ever seen, but it's very effective in that way. And that was his second movie. And then he takes a scale up from to create this movie, which, you know, could have been much more conventional, but is most certainly not, as our discussion has kind of established at this point. And, you know, he is such a striking filmmaker. You would think that the studios would be clamoring to, you know, get him to do something, but whether or not it's his work is too weird or he just doesn't want that, he's not direct. His next movie is not going to be a Marvel movie. It's not going to be a movie based on, you know, a toy or some piece of IP. He's doing, well, I shouldn't say IP, because his next movie is going to be an adaptation of Nosferatu, which is a
shut up and take my money.
Yeah, it's an adaptation of Nosferatu, starring actually the other Skarsgård brother, Bill Skarsgård, and was originally going to include Anya Taylor-Joy before, unfortunately, she had to drop out due to scheduling conflicts.
No,
I was crushed when I heard that. I believe Lily Rose Depp is replacing her, but I want the two of them to work together like as much as possible. Like she actually joked in an interview that there wasn't really a role for her in The Lighthouse, because it's essentially a two-hander between Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. But as I mentioned, there is a mermaid, and she was like, "I'll play the mermaid. I just want to work with Robert Eggers." But you know, he has cultivated this stable of actors, including Willem Dafoe and Ralph Ineson and Kate Dickie and Anya Taylor-Joy, who clearly love him and are working with his vision. I hope he gets to work with Robert Pattinson again. I hope he gets to work with Alexander Skarsgård again. I had no idea who Claes Bang, who plays Fjolnir, is before I saw this movie. He was great. He is just like, Robert Eggers is on a heater right now, and I just want him to keep going with it for as long as humanly possible.
I didn't really. I don't think I praised him enough, probably because I was afraid to try to pronounce his name. How did you say the actor's name again?
I said Claes Bang, but okay. I don't know if that's actually. I feel confident pronouncing the last name. It's literally spelled Bang. I don't know if it's Claes or Klaus, but regardless, I feel bad because great actor, great performance.
Yeah, I talked about the character a lot, but oh my God, the performance was just out of this world. I mean, everybody was fantastic. I know Lady Starfall mentioned the one casting that she wasn't crazy about was Nicole Kidman, but I actually thought she was utterly fantastic, and I was not disappointed with anybody's performance in this movie.
She was an interesting casting because she's by far the biggest name in the cast, and when you see her at the beginning of the movie, you're like it seems like kind of a small role for her to take, and then you get to her Gudrun's big scene, you're like, oh, that's why she took the role. That's why she's in the and perhaps
and we didn't even talk about the whole we kind of worked our way around it. We didn't really mention the incest angle of that scene. That's what makes it so twisted and disturbing. It's like I'm kind of like I have full sympathy for for the decisions she's had to make up until that moment, and then I'm like, oh, she'd just be crazy.
Yeah, I think it's just you really do sympathize with her in a lot of ways up until that point, but I think it just really shows how horribly damaged she is. Yeah. Horribly damaged she is from a life of having to live with her attacker, and live as a wife to him, and that she has kind of gotten to this point where any kind of any sense of morals have just pretty much have gone out the window. She is she is, for a brief moment there, it seems like she's even willing to throw her own current family under the bus to survive.
Yeah,
but I don't know.
It's completely about her survival. If that's and so and it's just so twisted because you can understand with everything she's gone through how she gets, but it's so messed up.
It's so messed up, and I mean, it's clearly about. I think it kind of it's obviously it's a very patriarchal society, and I think she has learned along the way that the only way she can gain power over these men that have that can physically do anything they want with her is to use sex. And it makes you kind of wonder in some ways her love for Fjolnir seemed genuine. I wanted, his children, I wanted to be with him. And there's a sympathy for that, that she wanted to get out of this horrible marriage and be in a loving one. But at the last, when it seems like, that's all going to go away, she's like, well, that was nice, but let me come up with my plan C now, and
that scene is fascinating because she does, when Amleth comes to her and is trying to convince her, I'm here to rescue you, I'm here to kill who I think is your abusive husband, and she doesn't even entertain the fantasy. She slowly kind of lets the mask fall in that scene. She's like, you think that everything that you thought is wrong, and I'm going to just destroy your world piece by piece. And I think that her essentially attempting to seduce him is part of that. She is literally screwing with his mind, trying to unbalance him and unnerve him. And well, I do think that there may have been an element of her trying to build an escape route for herself. We also see that when he is, when he finally does pull away from her, she was trying to grab his sword, she was trying to, run him through at the end. And at that scene afterwards, after Amleth has gone off in a rage and killed Thorir, because he at the time thinks he can't kill Gudrun, even though he ultimately does. And Fjolnir is effectively gone to pieces, and that's when Gudrun comes up to him, and she is effectively becomes the devil whispering in his ear. She picks him back up, is like, no, this isn't a monstrous demon. This is my cursed son Amleth, and I want you to go and cut his heart out and bring it to me. And in that scene, she almost takes on elements of another Shakespearean character of Lady Macbeth, but she rather than Lady Macbeth ultimately goes insane from the guilt of what conspiring to commit murder. Gudrun almost seems to be unshackled by that. And by the end, when Almleth comes back to exact his vengeance on Fjolnir, and Gudrun, he goes into the hut, and Gudrun doesn't even waste time trying to talk to him. She just attacks him with the sword, and she has effectively become animalistic in that moment. She is just there to see him bleed, and he kills her in self-defense. And the fascinating moment of her death is when, after he stabs her, she kind of falls back in his arms, and it's in the heart, and she thanks him before she passes away. And you're just left wondering, who was this woman? What did she become? Was she always this way, or did life essentially unmoor her? I kind of feel like that's ultimately what happened because of all the trauma that she suffered.
God, yeah, and again, it's as horrible as all these people are, so utterly fascinating and just interesting. But after all that, is she thanking him because that's the quick way to die, or is she happy to be freed from all of this, given what she's gone through in her life? It's it's just all so fascinating.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've gone a bit over 2 hours. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you guys especially want to highlight?
Well, I was just going to say, back to Robert Eggers, is that he's got his rep as as a certified weirdo, and we love him for it. But I don't know, I kind of thought that this movie also showed that he's got some real chops with directing some more mainstream action scenes. The fight scenes were great in this movie. And that's something that could be, for lack of a better term, a little more commercial. So he's definitely has some range. And by the way, that scene when the spear is thrown from that fort and then he catches it and throws it right back out, that was fucking sick. I'm sorry. That was one of the best shots in that movie. And I could watch it over and over again.
When I saw that in the trailer, I was like, did I see what I think I just saw? It's I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Trish, because we've been celebrating Robert Eggers for his weirdness and his creative vision, and it needs to be reinforced that he's a masterful filmmaker in terms of just the basic cinematic arts of tension and motivation and blocking and everything that he did to set up these scenes. So there are filmmakers who are weird experimental filmmakers who make movies that leave you with a similar mind fuck type feeling, but sometimes those movies aren't really narratively coherent, and they get that mind fuckiness, pardon the French, from just leaving you as the audience feeling like I don't know what's happening here. That's not really the case with his movies. Like Robert Eggers, he does make you feel unsettled. He makes you feel like, what am I watching? But I never felt lost watching this narrative. There was never a point where I was like, I don't follow what these characters and their motivations. There are motivations that are meant to be ambiguous, but it's not the filmmakers playing a trick on me. It's a reveal. And he, like the way that he structures the reveal of Gudrun's true nature, like that's filmmaking craft. That's not him playing a trick or being coy or cutting randomly to a dream sequence that doesn't really have a purpose. He is, everything in this movie serves the larger narrative, and that speaks to his technical prowess as a director. So that's why he's a special talent.
Yeah, this movie is like, you can almost say that the plot, the quote unquote plot of the movie is deceptively simple, and but there's so much intricacy in the way the story unfolds, and just like in the scenes themselves, like what you were just saying with the scene with Amleth's mother, and the way that actually unfolds is masterful, even though the actual like plot progression of the movie is, it's as like, it's a revenge story. It's kind of like, there's nothing by the numbers about the movie, but
it's not even a simple moral lesson like revenge is bad, folks.
Yeah,
it's not even like that.
It's just like the movie itself is so intricate, but like the plot structure is, as I said, deceptively simple. So that makes it so that the story, you can follow it easily. It's not trying to like confuse you for the sake of, just confusing you like a lot of movies seem to try and do. So I think that it's beautifully done, and and you guys are right. Like the battle scenes and the fight scenes are just so masterfully staged. So yeah, it shows a lot of like mainstream sort of, shows his ability to maybe do some more mainstream stuff. I don't want to see him do a Marvel movie or something, but but I do think it's interesting, and it'll be intriguing to go back now, and since this was my first exposure to him, to now go back and see the earlier films. And if those are less mainstream.
Yeah, well, so what I would say on that front is The Witch and this movie are actually pretty similar in their structure, and like The Witch is kind of this vibe but for horror. It's like it also is a pretty conventional, like conventionally structured movie. There's a monster in the woods, and people, but it's the way it's about it. It's a movie. It's a horror movie that thrives on its psychologically unsettling nature, and less on jump scares, and that kind of stuff, which makes it and there's a very strong character work as well. Also, a goat who may be the devil.
Yeah, and the horror of teenage girl puberty.
Yes, exactly. The scariest of all.
But I will say that those are the horror movies that appeal to me, that are more about the tone and the unsettling nature of things rather than jump scares. I really don't. I should say I normally don't care for them, because because when it comes to like the alien movies, like I like the jump scares there too, but those movies are very much about, especially the first Alien, is all about the unsettling environment and how quiet things are, and And so that's the type of stuff that I tend to, if I end up liking a horror movie, it's because it traffics more in that than just trying to make you jump, every few minutes. And so I actually think that The Witch is probably going to be right up my alley in that way. And so I think I'll enjoy it.
No, I hope that you do, and make sure you watch it by yourself in a completely dark room when nobody else is home.
Well, it's funny because I hate being scared, but when it's with the right movie, like I invite it, like, and I said like Alien. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. Which is counterintuitive to the fact that I don't like being scared. And I will only watch it at night with all the lights off because I want that atmosphere. When Ripley is going through the hallways of the ship and all the lights are flashing, I want the whole room at night to be like flashing along with I want the light reflecting off the walls and stuff because it's just, because if I'm going to watch it, I want to be freaked out. I want to be appropriately freaked out watching it. And so it's just so weird because normally that is not my thing, but when it works, it works. So
no. And I think you'll very much enjoy The Witch. I would say probably save The Lighthouse for last, just because that is definitely the movie. It has probably the simplest plot, which it needs because the rest of the movie is so crazy around it. It essentially is about the process of slowly going insane. But again, it's not like a difficult movie to follow plot wise. It's just that over time, what you're seeing on screen gradually becomes more and more and more unhinged. So I would say that's probably the most acquired taste among the films of this very unique filmmaker. Again, it's weird to say that The Northman is probably his most conventional movie, but
it's like saying that 12 Monkeys is Terry Gilliam's most conventional movie. It's like that's not saying a whole lot. Which is another movie we have to discuss at some point because although I don't know if you're a fan or not, but I have always loved 12 Monkeys. That's one of my favorite movies. So.
I actually have never seen it. I'll add it to the list.
It's been years and years since I've seen it, so I can't even remember much about it.
I just remember that my mom and I like agonized over figuring out the ending of the movie. And then at a certain point, I was like, I think I kind of got it, but I don't really care anymore because I just love the movie. So, then just let the ending be a bit of a mystery. But no, that'd be great. I'd add that to your watch list, Jared, and you can let me know.
I'll watch 12 Monkeys. You watch The Witch, and we'll meet somewhere in the middle of between insanity and madness.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we veered away from talking about the Northman. We were just talking about Robert Eggers' filmography, which I'll be able to say more about soon enough. Once I see his other films. But if there's nothing, I'll just wrap up by saying like I love this movie. It's like I said, one of my top films of 2022, and really it's just one of the best. I was just going to say best films of this genre, but what even is this genre? It defies the genre. But it's right there alongside for me, The Green Knight, with like these freaky, historical, again, I don't know what to call it, epic. It's an intimate story, but it's also got scale. So I don't know. If anybody,
it's Hamlet.
Yeah,
it's Hamlet.
Yeah, it's Hamlet. A tragedy. It's a tragedy. There we go.
Yeah.
I'll call it that.
Yeah. Okay. It's a Shakespearean tragedy set and told as a bunch of Vikings. So.
Yeah. So if anybody watched this whole thing and you haven't seen the movie, we spoiled a lot, but I hope you'll. But I also feel like this is one of those movies that, like, if you haven't seen the movie, you kind of haven't understood everything that we've been saying. Yeah. So you'll still get a lot of enjoyment out of it. It's very much, it's the same thing, Trish, as when you and I talked about The Green Knight. It's like,
oh God,
did that make sense to anybody who hadn't seen the movie? So yeah, I think, and if you're watching this and you haven't seen either of those films, they're a great double feature, I think. So go ahead and check those out. And Jared and I will be off for the next couple weeks, well, as well as Trish, because she's going to be joining us when we come back. So we'll be doing Sleepy Hollow on November 4th. And yeah, please join us for that. That's going to be a lot of fun. Anything you guys want to say before we sign off?
Good.
Nope. Happy Halloween, everybody. You know, come get load up on all those scary movies and spooky movies, and come back ready to discuss another movie that features, you know, stylized blood and gore and violence in a kind of period setting, because that's just our vibe right now.
Yeah, and it's weird that one of the things that I'm actually most looking forward to, and this is kind of random, but like I said before, that movie has an astounding cast, but I love that it's got a whole bunch of like classic British actors in it, just like in smaller roles. You know, you got like Christopher Lee, Michael Gambon, Michael Gough, I think his name is, who played Alfred from, you know, the original Batman films. Ian McDiarmid is in it. Richard Griffiths, you know, like all of these like classic actors, and then of course, yeah, you've got Johnny Depp and Christina Ricci, you know, at the top of the list. And yeah, no, it's an excellent movie, and it's probably one of my favorite Tim Burton films that he ever did. So yeah, join us for that, and thank you all for tuning in. We did better than last week with the time. I will say, Jared, that, you know, our view count went down a little bit. I wonder if that had anything to do with the fact that we went over 3.5 hours.
It's possible, but you know, bits and pieces for that one.
Yeah, exactly.
But all worthwhile.
Yeah. Okay, guys. So and thank you, Trish, again for joining us, and looking forward to having you back in a couple weeks.
Always a pleasure.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. Hope you guys have a wonderful night. And I don't even know what my sign off is, because the last couple weeks.
I think the only appropriate sign off for this movie is to Valhalla.
To Valhalla. All right. Bye, guys.